Nathaniel Nate Beckford leaned against the glass pane of his corner office, gazing at the sprawling metropolis below. Neon signs flickered, car horns blared, and the endless hum of the city seemed to fill every space in his mind. A swirl of restlessness tightened his chest. At 32, he was the youngest billionaire in his business circles, the founder of Beckford Ventures, a tech conglomerate that raked in billions from e-commerce solutions and cutting-edge apps. By all accounts, he'd reached the pinnacle of success. But standing there in the hush of late evening, he felt only emptiness. The adrenaline of multi-million-dollar acquisitions no longer electrified him. Instead, he found himself longing for something intangible. Authenticity, maybe, or a sense of belonging that money couldn't buy. Every attempt at forging personal connections seemed overshadowed by others' awareness of his fortune. Women either ogled him for his status or cowered under the pressure of his name. Potential friends turned into yes-men or business opportunists. One evening, while aimlessly browsing real estate listings, he stumbled upon a property that jolted him like a spark of possibility. A humble cabin in the woods, nestled deep in the Cascade Mountains, a good 4 hours now drive from the city, rustic logs, a stone hearth, and wraparound porch overlooking a forested lake. The photos exuded a quiet simplicity, the polar opposite of his penthouse, a place where the only background noise might be wind in the pines and loons across the water. He found himself picking up the phone without hesitation, calling the broker. Within a week, he'd signed the purchase. His team of advisors declared it a frivolous decision. You won't have decent Wi-Fi. The roads might be inaccessible in winter, but Nate only smiled. Perhaps that was exactly the point. Soon he had his personal assistant, Trevor, gather essentials. No brand new redesign or staff on site, just some basics for living off the grid. He cleared a chunk of his schedule, ignoring protests from investors. I need a break, he told them bluntly, and I'm taking one. Days later, he stepped out of a sleek SUV onto a gravel driveway, crisp mountain air filling his lungs. The cabin stood among towering evergreens, autumn leaves drifting lazily across the yard. Already, the hush of this wilderness felt more comforting than all the city's luxuries combined. He was prepared for dust, maybe minor repairs. But as he approached the front door, a wave of excitement fluttered in his chest. Could this remote hideaway offer the peace his life lacked? With a deep breath, he unlocked the door, stepping into a place that promised quiet nights, star-filled skies, and an uncharted sense of freedom. Little did he know that a neighbor would soon appear, someone who disliked everything about the city he came from, yet would captivate his heart in ways he'd never anticipated. Nate surveyed the cabin's interior. A single large room served as living space, kitchen, and dining area, with a rustic loft above for sleeping. The wood stove in the corner looked ancient. The stone hearth was blackened with soot. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams piercing through small windows. The entire place smelled faintly of cedar and old books, an oddly comforting scent. He set down his groceries, scanning the utility situation. Flicking a light switch produced a sputtering flicker, so the power wasn't completely dead. The water tap groaned before spitting out a rusty trickle. He found a fuse box, flipping switches and cursing under his breath. City life had never prepared him for manual tinkering. Still, he was determined to manage without calling a caretaker or staff, wanting genuine solitude. By midday, he discovered more quirks. The stovepipe had cracks that vented smoky air into the living space. Half the windows stuck in their frames, and the generator in the back shed refused to start. He spent hours leafing through a battered user manual, frustration mounting with each passing glitch. So much for an easy getaway. Part of him wondered if he'd be better off in a 5-star resort, but another part insisted this was the challenge he needed. He was wrestling with an ancient generator cord when footsteps crunched on the gravel outside. Then came a knock on the half-open door. "Hello?" a woman's voice called, a note of curiosity laced with caution. Setting down the cord, he turned to see a tall woman, though not quite as tall as him, wearing rugged boots, faded jeans, and a plaid jacket. She was lean, with auburn hair twisted into a casual bun. Her posture exuded confidence, like someone who took care of herself. Nate wiped his hands on his pants, forcing a polite smile. "Hey, Can I help you? She gave him a once-over, noticing the fancy SUV parked out front, then returning her gaze to his sweaty, flustered face. You're the new owner, right? I'm Mallory Thorne. My place is next door. Well, through the trees, a quarter mile up the lane. She jerked her thumb over her shoulder. Saw your vehicle. Figured I'd check who moved in. Yeah, I'm Nate Beckford, he replied, brushing hair from his eyes. Just arrived. Sorry about the mess. Still figuring out the generator. He gestured lamely at the tangle of wires. Mallory arched a brow. Generator's tricky. The last owner rarely maintained it. I can give you a hand if you want. Her tone suggested a readiness, but also an edge, like she was gauging whether he was a threat to her quiet mountain domain. That'd be great, he admitted, grateful for any help. I'm a bit out of my element. She smirked. City folk usually are. Then she extended a hand, warm but firm. Welcome to the neighborhood, I guess. She rummaged in the shed, fiddling with the generator's choke and spark plug as he watched, fascinated. Within minutes, it coughed to life, humming with mechanical relief. He exhaled, a grin splitting his face. Wow, thanks. I owe you one. Mallory shrugged. Just looking out for the peace around here. If your generator kept dying, I'd end up hearing you curse at midnight. She gave a small grin, her earlier wariness softening. Anyway, best of luck settling in. With that, she headed off, leaving Nate with a mixture of relief and curiosity swirling in his chest. She'd barely arrived, but already made a big difference. He wondered if this neighbor was as guarded about outsiders as her initial vibe suggested. He also sensed that behind that tough exterior, she might share a love for these woods that matched his longing for a simpler life. And maybe, just maybe, she'd be part of the reason he'd come to truly value this battered old cabin in the mountains. The next morning, a crisp dawn glow woke Nate earlier than any city alarm. He brewed basic coffee in a beat-up percolator, inhaling the fresh pine-scented breeze rolling through the open window. The mountain's silence, punctuated by birdsong, contrasted sharply with his usual routine of emails and city clamor. Curious about his surroundings, he ventured down a narrow trail behind the cabin. It meandered through tall pines, dew glistening on the underbrush. Eventually, it opened onto a spectacular view, a pristine lake, mirror-like under the morning sky. The hush felt sacred, each breath reaffirming his choice to leave behind skyscrapers for these towering evergreens, if only temporarily. Suddenly, movement by the lake drew his eye. Mallory stood knee-deep in the shallows, wearing rubber boots and a sweater. She was tossing large pebbles, watching the ripples. She turned at the sound of him snapping a twig. Instantly, her posture went alert, though not hostile. Morning, she said, surprise in her tone. Didn't expect to see you up so early. City folks usually value their sleep. He raised a brow, a half-smile tugging at his lips. You keep calling me city folks, like it's a disease. She shrugged, wading back to shore. No offense, but that's how I see it. People from the city blow in here, rave about the scenery, then try to commercialize it or get bored and leave. She scanned him. Are you planning to stick around or just messing around with a weekend property? He rubbed the back of his neck. Honestly, not sure. I came here to escape the noise, see if I could find some clarity. So far, I like it. Her gaze lingered, measuring him. Then she exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing. Well, if you're here for peace, I can't argue with that. I just worry about the next step, like new roads or a fancy resort creeping in. This forest is my home. I want it preserved. He nodded, empathizing with her protective stance. I get it. I'm not interested in building anything. Just a quiet place to breathe. No expansions, I promise. Mallory regarded him for a long moment, then jerked her head toward a small path on the side. Want to see something cool? Curiosity piqued. Sure. He followed her along a hidden trail that twisted around the lake's edge, culminating in a rocky outcrop with a panoramic view of the entire valley. Sunlight bathed the distant peaks, the lake shimmered below. Nate stared, awed. Wow, he breathed. Mallory crossed her arms, watching him. This is why I can't live anywhere else. Could you walk away from this? He swallowed, mind flicking back to his city penthouse. I'm starting to think I might not want to, he replied softly. She gave a half smile, appreciation battling her ingrained distrust. We'll see, she murmured. Anyway, you wanted peace. Well, you just found it. As they stood side by side, a gentle breeze ruffling the pines, Nate felt a flicker of electricity in the silence. Mallory, the outspoken mountain girl, might be the key to discovering a sense of belonging he'd never felt in the city. But bridging their worlds would be no simple task. In the days that followed, Nate embraced the cabin's challenges, learning to split logs for the woodpile, adjusting the rickety shutters, and hauling water from the nearby pump when the main pipe gave out. Mallory occasionally appeared, at times offering tips, at others cocking an eyebrow at his city-bred clumsiness. They traded small talk, from local wildlife sightings to debates over the best brand of coffee beans. Their conversations often danced around the unspoken tension that her background and his resources were worlds apart. She saw him as a fish out of water, but not necessarily an unwelcome one, just a puzzle. He, on the other hand, admired her independence and knowledge, but sensed she held a deep-rooted distrust for outsiders. Every so often, she'd reference a past fiasco with city developers or share a story about how a wealthy absentee landowner neglected forest upkeep, leading to environmental damage. Nate gleaned from these anecdotes how fiercely protective she was of these woods. One afternoon, he tried to help her reinforce a fence that separated her property from a narrow public trail. The conversation meandered to city versus country lifestyles. "You must have had all the comforts in the city," she said, driving a nail into a wooden post. "Why trade that for a rundown cabin with spotty electricity?" He hammered another nail, shrugging. "The city can be suffocating. Meetings, phone calls, deals, always in motion. I needed a place where I could think or not think, just exist." He paused. "What about you? Ever think of moving to the city for more opportunities?" A shadow crossed her face. "I tried it once, years ago. Hated it. The noise, the pollution, the way everyone rushed and rarely cared about nature. I came back after 6 months, swore I'd never live in a concrete box again." He nodded. "I get that, but not all city folks are callous or out to destroy nature." He realized how that might sound defensive. She threw him a look that said she'd heard such claims before. "Maybe. Or maybe enough of them are, which is why I'm cautious." They finished the fence repairs in a thick silence. By dusk, as she brushed sawdust from her jeans, she offered a quiet thanks. He nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. They parted with no tension resolved, but no open hostility either. Just an underlying sense that bridging the gap between their lifestyles would require more than shared chores. That night, as Nate gazed at the stars from his porch, he mulled over the divide. Mallory's stance wasn't personal, but shaped by real experiences with city intrusions. If he wanted a chance at her trust, and perhaps something deeper, he'd have to prove himself worthy of these mountains, not just buy a cabin and call it a day. A few weeks in, the nights grew colder, the smell of impending winter drifting on the evening breeze. Nate had grown fond of bundling up in flannels, tending the wood stove, and falling asleep to the lullaby of crickets. The more time he spent away from urban chaos, the more he craved these quiet routines. Despite the guarded interactions, he and Mallory found themselves organically spending more time together. She'd invite him on short hikes to scenic overlooks or to a hidden meadow where wildflowers still lingered. He'd sometimes ask her help with the cabin's ongoing issues, like unclogging the old chimney or insulating the drafty windows. Each conversation revealed new facets. She'd talk about her parents, how they taught her the delicate balance of living off the land without exploiting it. He, carefully omitting the full scale of his wealth, explained how building a massive tech enterprise had left him unfulfilled, longing for something real. A subtle trust budded. One evening, she came by with a small dish of homemade venison stew. "Figured you might be sick of your own cooking by now," she teased at the door. He laughed, accepting it gratefully. They shared the stew on his newly repaired porch, the sun dipping behind the pines. The conversation turned playful, teasing each other about past mishaps, but there was a softness in her voice that hinted at deeper interest. After finishing dinner, Mallory lingered, arms folded against the slight chill. Nate rummaged inside, returning with a worn blanket. He draped it over her shoulders gently, catching her eyes as he did so. Electricity hummed in the air. She swallowed, her breath hitching. He sat beside her, close enough to feel her warmth. "You know," he began, voice subdued, This is the happiest I've felt in ages. Strange, right? I've only known you for a few weeks, but it feels like you see me, not just my facade. Her cheeks tinted in the dusky light. You're different than I expected. Most city people who come here either brag about their money or degrade the local lifestyle. You haven't done either. She paused, turning her gaze away briefly. I like that about you. He inhaled, heart pounding at the quiet confession. Slowly, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. They sat in hushed camaraderie, the forest evening wrapping around them like a tender cloak. The swirl of crickets, the faint glow of porch lantern, the tension of possibility, all conspired to nudge them closer. But for all the sweetness, an undercurrent of uncertainty lingered. Could this fragile bond hold up once she discovered the full extent of his wealth? For now, though, neither voiced that fear. Instead, they let the gentle hush of the pines and the shared glow of new affection speak what words could not. As the first hints of snow touched the higher peaks, demands from Nate's corporation pressed him. He juggled hush-hush phone calls with executives, stepping away from Mallory whenever the conversation risked exposing his identity. She noticed his odd behaviors but rarely pried, assuming he was handling some leftover city business. Yet the time for truth was fast approaching. While rummaging through old boxes in the cabin, Nate uncovered a battered trunk from the previous owner. Inside lay photographs, journals describing life in the mountains, and documents about local property lines. It fascinated him how differently one might experience life out here, with minimal commerce and interdependence on neighbors. He realized he loved that sense of community Mallory epitomized. In the city, each day was a scramble for advantage. Here, people helped each other for the sake of it, like how Mallory fixed his generator or how neighbors swapped produce. He felt an ache at the thought of returning to the corporate limelight full-time. One evening, Mallory found him poring over these old documents by candlelight, a phone perched on the table. "What's all this?" she asked, stepping in. He explained he was just exploring the cabin's history. She nodded, but her sharp eyes flicked to the phone. "You've been awfully secretive with calls. Is there something you're not telling me?" His heart lurched. This was the moment. "Yes," he admitted, exhaling shakily. "Mallory, I said I worked in business. The truth is, I own a major tech company. My full name is Nathaniel Beckford. In the city, people treat me like a big deal. I wanted to escape that, so I didn't say how wealthy I actually am." She froze, realization dawning. "Wait, Nathaniel Beckford? I've seen that name in news headlines, some hotshot billionaire or something. That's you?" A mixture of shock and a hint of betrayal laced her voice. He nodded, scanning her face. "I'm sorry I hid it from you. I just needed to see if someone could value me, not my money or status. I never meant to deceive you personally. I was going to tell you, but—" He trailed off, fear gripping him that she might reject him now. Mallory stared at him for several beats, the glow of the lamp casting shadows across her conflicted expression. Finally, she spoke, voice taut. "So you came here, pretending to be a normal guy, while you're actually a billionaire who could buy half this forest?" He grimaced. "Yes, but I swear I'm not buying the forest. I won't build resorts or tear anything down. I just needed a break." He stepped closer, voice trembling. "I know I should have told you sooner, but I was terrified you'd see me differently or think I was here to exploit the land." She swallowed, tears threatening to form. "Do you think that little of me? That I'd dump you if I knew you were rich? Or do you think I'd fawn over you for it?" His heart wrenched. "Neither. But it's happened before. People treat me like a trophy or a stepping stone. I wanted something real, and with you, it felt real from the start." He paused, desperation shining in his eyes. "Please believe me." She looked away, arms hugging herself. Hurt mingled with anger at the deception. "I need time," she whispered, turning to leave. "I just need time to think." He watched her walk out, chest tight with regret. The connection they'd built might teeter on the brink of collapse. He prayed it could withstand the shock of the truth he should have shared long ago. For days, Mallory avoided him. She skipped their usual coffee chats or joint chores. The crisp mountain air now felt colder to Nate, robbed of the warmth her presence provided. He left messages on her phone, short notes at her doorstep, apologizing, offering an explanation. Silence greeted him each time. He found himself restless, pacing the cabin's living area, rechecking the stove, polishing the dusty shelves, anything to distract from the sting of her absence. Even the star-studded nights failed to console him. Typically, he'd find solace in the hush of nature. Now it only emphasized his loneliness. Meanwhile, Mallory fought her own internal battle. She missed their camaraderie, the laughter, the heart-to-heart talks. Yet she couldn't shake the sense of betrayal. How many times had she opened up about her distrust of city big shots, only to learn he was precisely that? But then she remembered how he helped fix her fence, how he bungled hooking up the generator until she guided him, how gentle he was with the local wildlife. Could a corporate mogul truly be that earnest? One afternoon, she visited Miss Lowery, an elderly neighbor down the lane seeking advice. Miss Lowery, known for her wise counsel, listened patiently. Sometimes, dear, folks who come from wealth hide it because they're just as afraid as we are, afraid of being used or judged. She sipped her tea, setting it down with a soft clink. If he's not trying to commercialize your forest and truly respects it, maybe give him a chance to prove it. Mallory left, Ms. Lowery's words echoing in her mind. She realized that if Nate had wanted to exploit the area, he'd have done so already or shown some sign. Instead, he genuinely seemed content chopping wood, hiking trails, learning the land's rhythms. Perhaps the bigger question was whether she could forgive his deception. That evening, storms rolled in. From her window, Mallory watched thick clouds gather. The phone buzzed, a text from Nate. She almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Nate, I'm truly sorry. If you never speak to me again, I understand. But I want you to know, I love these mountains, and I respect you more than words can say. I'll wait if that's what it takes. Her chest constricted. Anger and longing warred within her. She typed out a reply, then deleted it. Gripping the phone, she stared at the swirling sky. Perhaps it was time to face him, no matter how uncertain her heart felt. The next day, Mallory finally approached Nate's cabin. The sun was setting, bathing the treetops in gold. She found him on the porch, an open book on his lap, though his gaze seemed distant. At her footsteps, he looked up, surprise etched across his features. She cleared her throat. Mind if I come up? His voice trembled with relief. Of course. She sat down on the porch step, leaving a small distance between them. They both stared at the forest edge, silence thick as a handful of minutes crawled by. Eventually, Mallory spoke. I was furious you hid your identity. I shared everything about my life, and you never told me yours. Her tone was measured, not harsh. It felt like I was the only one being honest. Nate's shoulders sagged. You're right, I messed up. Initially, I was terrified you'd judge me if you knew I was a billionaire. People treat me differently. I'd finally found someone who saw me as just Nate, not a bank account. She nodded, absorbing his words. I get that, I do, but you see how it looks from my side, right? He nodded solemnly. Yes, I let my fear overshadow your right to know who you were talking to. For that, I'm sorry. They lapsed into quiet again. A gentle breeze rustled fallen leaves. At length, Mallory inhaled. These weeks, they've been some of the best times I've had in years. The city used to represent everything I hated. Greed, noise, disregard for nature. But you showed me a different side. You value simplicity here. That's why this stings, because I believed in you. His throat tightened. He reached out, hesitant, and placed a hand over hers. She didn't pull away. I still want you to believe in me. I'd never let any corporate interest damage these woods. I'm not here to build or exploit. I swear it. Softening, she let out a trembling breath. I think you've proven that. And maybe, she added, eyes shifting to meet his gaze, I overreacted because I was afraid of being hurt or used. He gently squeezed her hand. We've both been guarded. You, because of how city people can exploit these lands. Me, because of how people exploit my wealth. Her eyes flicked to their joined hands. So where do we go from here? A small, hopeful smile curved his lips. We move forward. Honestly, step by step. If you'll let me try again. Emotions welled in her. She nodded, tears glazing her eyes. I'd like that. They edged closer until their shoulders touched. He tentatively lifted a hand to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Her breath quivered, but she let him. Then, in a gentle, tentative gesture, they leaned in, sharing a kiss that felt like an unspoken vow of trust. The quiet hush of the surrounding pines held them as the final rays of sunlight painted the sky with violet and gold. The days that followed brought fresh challenges. With their relationship mending, Mallory let go of most of her resentment, but new tensions arose as Nate's corporate obligations demanded more frequent travel. He needed to appear at a major board meeting for Beckford Ventures, which meant leaving for a full week. She wondered if the city's gravitational pull would lure him away indefinitely. One morning, as he loaded a small suitcase into the SUV, he caught the worry in her eyes. "I'll be back soon," he promised. "I won't vanish. This is my home now. Our home, if you'll have me in your life." She folded her arms, half smiling. "It's still surreal to imagine you as a billionaire out there closing massive deals, then returning here to chop wood." He chuckled, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "That's the life I want, a balance of both. Hang in there. I'll call when I can." He drove off, leaving her standing in the driveway, heart clenched. She tried occupying herself with chores and local errands, but the cabin next door felt oddly empty. Each day, she half expected him to text last minute, saying he'd been roped into some indefinite expansion plan in Singapore or London. Was she naive to think he'd keep prioritizing this simple lifestyle? Meanwhile, in the city, Nate navigated a swirl of board presentations, media interviews, and investor lunches. Yet he found himself checking his phone relentlessly for messages from Mallory. The office chatter about new expansions no longer sparked the old thrill. Instead, he daydreamed about the crisp mountain air, the quiet nights on the cabin porch, and Mallory's unpretentious smile. At a high-profile investor dinner, a real estate developer tried pitching a mountain resort concept. Nate's jaw tightened. He politely declined, stating environmental concerns. But inside, he bristled, recalling Mallory's warnings about city dwellers exploiting the land. "Never," he muttered under his breath, ignoring the developer's perplexed expression. On the final day of his city trip, he dialed Mallory. She picked up on the second ring. Relief drenched his tone as he said, "I miss you, and I'm heading back tomorrow. Are we good?" Her voice came soft and reassuring. "I miss you too, so yeah, we're good." That single line of warmth carried him through a grueling final meeting. The moment it ended, he hopped into his car, driving hours through the night to reach the cabin by dawn. As he parked in the dim light, he caught a glimpse of her silhouette by the window. The tension from the city evaporated, replaced by a sweet ache that whispered, this was where he truly belonged. Autumn faded into winter swiftly in the mountains, the temperature dropping, nights growing long. Nate, determined to be prepared, installed a modern but discreet heating system in his cabin. He also helped Mallory shore up her own home's insulation. Their collaboration bonded them further, the easy banter, the small acts of physical closeness. On a frosty December morning, the first snowfall draped the pines in pristine white. Nate woke early, stepping onto his porch to marvel at the transformation. Snow-laden branches glinted under the pale winter sun. He grabbed his coat, trudging to Mallory's cabin for a surprise visit. She opened the door, cheeks rosy from the cold, a half laugh escaping at the sight of him dusted in snow. "Eager, aren't you?" she teased, stepping aside. "I was just making cocoa." As they sipped the steaming mugs, conversation drifted to future plans. He confided how he intended to restructure parts of his corporation so he could spend more time here. She confided that she might expand her guide services next year, taking tourists on eco-friendly hiking tours. Warmed by cocoa and shared ambitions, they moved from the kitchen to her small living area. She showed him a battered scrapbook of old family photos, including her parents teaching her to fish at the nearby lake. Touched, Nate revealed the deeper reason for leaving the city behind. A recent health scare, stress-induced fainting spells that doctors warned could escalate if he didn't slow down. "It scared me," he said, voice quivering. "All that wealth, and I was wearing myself to the bone. I realized I needed a life worth living, not just chasing more zeros." Mallory's eyes brimmed with empathy. She reached across, cupping his jaw. "I'm glad you chose to save yourself," she whispered, "and I'm glad you found your way here, to me." He pressed his forehead to hers, heart hammering. "You've given me something priceless," he murmured, blinking away tears. "A reason to want to do better, for myself and for you." They shared a tender kiss, deeper than their usual chaste pecks, forging a quiet promise. Outside, the wind carried swirls of snow across the windows, but inside, the closeness they'd nurtured glowed with a comforting warmth. Yet, as winter pressed on, they both knew the real test was how well they could merge their worlds long term. She couldn't abandon the mountains, and he couldn't forsake the responsibilities of his empire. The question remained, would the love they discovered withstand that tension? One crisp afternoon, Mallory led Nate on a snowshoe trek to a seldom visited plateau offering panoramic views of the valley. The climb was steep, but the payoff was breathtaking. They set down a small thermos of hot tea, gazing at a sunset that bathed the horizon in fiery orange. As they huddled on a rock, clad in thick jackets, Mallory asked the question that had been simmering for weeks. What happens in spring or in a year? Will you still be here, or will business drag you back for good? Nate clasped her gloved hand, exhaling a foggy breath in the cold air. I can't lie, my responsibilities are huge. I have a board, thousands of employees, but I'm reorganizing. My CFO can handle the day-to-day, and I can manage strategic calls from here. I might have to commute occasionally, but I want my base to be in these mountains. Her gaze searched his, as if gauging sincerity. You sure you won't get bored? No fancy parties or fast living. He gently squeezed her hand. I've had enough of that to last a lifetime. The only excitement I crave now is maybe a rummage sale in town or helping you track wildlife for your tours. A soft laugh escaped them both. They drank in the view, silhouettes outlined by the sunset. At length, he murmured, I want more than just living here part-time. I want you, properly, fully. I'd love to talk about us building a future, here or wherever. We can figure it out. Her eyes misted. She let out a shaky exhale. I'm not used to big declarations, but yes, I see a future with you too, though I can't imagine living anywhere but these woods, so you're stuck with me guiding you through every snowstorm. He grinned, leaning in to kiss her, a swirl of relief and ardor filling his chest. The forest hush enveloped them, the colorful sky witnessing the forging of a deeper commitment. They parted, hearts pounding, the cold air no match for the heat of that moment. Descending the trail by moonlight, they joked about the small cabin expansions they might do, adding an art studio for Mallory's photography or a bigger porch for stargazing. For the first time in memory, Nate felt an unburdened sense of joy about the future, no longer overshadowed by corporate pressures alone. Spring arrived, and with it came a blossoming of both nature and their relationship. The snow melt revealed wildflowers across the meadows, brightening the mountain's face. Nate oversaw some modest renovations to his cabin, better insulation, new windows, a small greenhouse behind the shed. Meanwhile, Mallory prepared for her busiest guiding season, booking nature tours for visitors. They seamlessly supported each other. He constructed simple wooden signs for her tours, hammered them along trails to highlight scenic vantage points. She taught him the nuances of forest safety, from identifying edible berries to reading wildlife tracks. Their synergy felt natural, as if the mountains themselves blessed their union. Despite the peace, city obligations still beckoned occasionally. On some Fridays, Nate would drive to the city, holding a Saturday morning board meeting, then rush back Saturday evening to catch the last sunset from the cabin porch. Each time, Mallory teased him about living a double life, but her grin was affectionate. She believed wholeheartedly that he intended to keep his promise and remain anchored in the mountains. By June, the cabin's improvements were nearly done. Fresh paint on the logs, newly finished floors, a small shelf by the window brimming with local crafts they'd picked up from the region's artisans. Mallory's dog-eared nature field guides stacked beside some of Nate's business books. It became a blend of their worlds, money discreetly used for comfort, but never overshadowing the rustic charm she so loved. One evening, as they finished a quiet dinner on the wraparound porch, the last golden rays glinted off the lake. Mallory leaned against his shoulder, sighing contentedly. Remember the day you arrived, cursing the dusty corners? She teased. Now look at you. You can chop wood and fix a generator like a pro. He chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. All thanks to a certain mountain girl who taught me the ropes. He paused, voice turning serious. I can't imagine leaving now. This is where I want to be, with you. She smiled, eyes soft. I wouldn't have it any other way. As the sun slipped below the horizon, they stood, hand in hand, gazing at the tranquil water. The hush of dusk enveloped them, the forest alive with the rustle of nocturnal creatures. In that timeless moment, the city's neon hustle felt a world away. Here, among the pines, they'd found not just an escape, but a home. And in each other, a love that transcended their once clashing lives. Months later, the couple's synergy flourished. Nate balanced corporate leadership via remote calls, ensuring the city demands never fully lured him away. Mallory thrived as a local guide, introducing travelers to hidden trails and forging partnerships with eco-friendly tourism initiatives. She credited Nate's behind-the-scenes support but mostly relied on her own grit, refusing to let his money overshadow her independence. Every so often, they'd road trip into the city, just for a fancy dinner or to check on Nate's offices. Mallory, surprisingly, found parts of the urban landscape interesting, especially the museums and architecture. But after a day or two, they always felt the pull to return to the mountains. On a cool autumn night, they lay on the cabin's porch, a blanket spread beneath them, watching a meteor shower streak across the heavens. The hush of the forest wrapped them in a comforting lullaby. Nate pointed out a glimmering arc of light, then turned to Mallory with awe shining in his eyes. "You realize," he whispered, "this is the life I dreamed of. Someone who sees me for me, not for the deals or dollars. Someone who shares my love for quiet corners of the earth. You're that someone." She leaned her head against his shoulder, lips curving in a serene smile. "And you," she replied softly, "are the man who showed me that not every city soul intends to ruin the forest. You saw these woods with reverence, and that's how I fell for you." Their hands clasped in the darkness. Overhead, starlight shimmered, countless pinpricks of magic in the vast sky. The city might call occasionally, but here, in the hush of pine trees and moonlit lakes, they'd claimed a piece of forever. A place where a billionaire's spirit could find a home in the arms of the mountain girl next door, whose love soared higher than any skyscraper he'd ever built.